Dictator Putin has gone too far. After reports that Putin warned Donald Trump about preparations for a new Russian army offensive in Ukraine, the United States president is preparing to announce a record increase in arms supplies to Ukraine, and specifically offensive, not defensive, weapons. Moreover, according to sources in the White House, and as you understand, such leaks don't just happen by accident, Trump decided to provide Ukraine with long-range cruise missiles capable of reaching Moscow. At the same time, Trump officially announced that Ukraine would receive additional Patriot systems and missiles for them. Germany made a significant announcement regarding the provision of Taurus and Patriot missiles to Ukraine. And it's telling that against this backdrop, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte urgently flew to Washington to meet with Trump Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth and United States Secretary of State Mark Rubio to discuss large-scale arms purchases for Ukraine. And now, United States Senator Lindsey Graham announces that in the coming days, the United States will provide Ukraine with a record supply of weapons. And he even outlined exactly how this plan will be implemented. I'm Pechey. It's July 14th. Let's go through this step by step. But before we begin, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, leave a like, write any comment, and be sure to subscribe to my Telegram channel. The link is in this video's description. So, the main news today is that Donald Trump has apparently finally decided to provide Ukraine with long-range missiles. Moreover, one version of this missile can hit targets at almost 1,000 kilometers away, which means that Moscow is within its strike range. But be patient here, we'll break down this topic step by step, so let's go through everything in order. Almost 6 months after his inauguration, United States President Donald Trump, who promised wars that we finish and wars that we never start, has now unexpectedly shifted to a policy of containing Russia. It turns out this war is already his, despite his previous claim that it wasn't. And now his team is preparing new arms deliveries to Kyiv and is also considering a new package of sanctions against the Kremlin. The meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, which will take place at the White House, is another signal that the North Atlantic Alliance has really started to work more cohesively. As odd as it might seem, this aligns with the scenario Donald Trump strongly desired. It is expected that Trump will officially announce the transfer of a large amount of American weapons to Kyiv, but not directly, rather through allies in Europe. This is a welcome change in rhetoric. This is a statement by Senator Jeanne Shaheen, who is the leading Democrat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And then he goes on to say, quote, "It seems that Trump, at least in his recent comments, realizes this and finally understands it. Vladimir Putin is playing with him. It's still unclear how long this will last." Well, it's interesting that not long ago, Trump was actually blaming the Ukrainians themselves for the Russian interference. And during his conversation with Volodymyr Zelensky in the Oval Office, remember, he said, "You don't have any maps and you're dragging out the war altogether." He also approved lifting tariffs for Russia, called Putin strong, and assured that Ukraine would never join NATO. He generally blamed Ukraine for Russia's attack on the country. Now, the rhetoric is completely different. After Trump found out that the Pentagon had suspended some military aid to Kyiv, he personally ordered it to be resumed. This gave rise to hopes in Washington that the United States president might have finally supported the strategic course of the entire West, isolating Russia and strengthening Ukraine. Analysts suggest that the reason for Trump's change of course is not so much geopolitical, as it is rooted in personal disappointment, in a personal grievance. I would even say, earlier, Trump admired what he called Putin's ruthlessness, but he was hoping for reciprocity. He hoped for Putin's genuine admiration, but despite the flattery, Putin didn't truly admire him. Instead, the Russian dictator refused to respond to Trump's attempts to influence the situation in Ukraine, which is believed to have been a personal insult to the United States president. In addition, on July 3rd, as the publication writes, Putin said in a phone conversation with Trump that he was preparing a new large-scale offensive in Ukraine and didn't care about Trump's calls for peace. And now, on the eve of this, Trump announces that he will send Patriot air defense systems and missiles to Ukraine, emphasizing that they are necessary to protect Ukraine from the aggressive savage named Putin. Next is a quote from Trump. "I haven't agreed on the quantity yet, but the Ukrainians will have some systems because they need protection. The European Union is funding it, not us, but we'll send it as it's business for us." And we'll send them Patriot systems, which they urgently need. Yes, we'll send them Patriots, which they desperately need. Because Putin really surprised many people. He spoke beautifully, and in the evening he bombs everyone. There's a small problem here. I don't like it. The United States plans to supply Ukraine with various types of high-tech military equipment. They will pay us 100% for this, and that's what we want. Today, I noticed that some Ukrainian commentators picked up on Donald Trump's phrase where he says that supposedly Putin speaks nicely but bombs everyone in the evening. But there's a small problem here. Well, they latched onto it and started saying that this isn't a small problem. It's a huge problem. Context is important. Trump says Putin speaks nicely but bombs everyone in the evening, but there's a small problem here. I don't like it. This is said in this context like, for Putin there's a little problem, Trump doesn't like it, so there will be consequences. Trump also claimed that the European Union will reimburse the United States for the cost of all the supplies. According to him, this week he plans to meet with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte to discuss Ukraine and other issues. Here's another point I'd like to mention, which was also a bit confused by Ukrainian commentators. Some Western media outlets, for example, the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, and Cable News Network, are also talking about this today. Trump was referring to the supply of air defense systems, not K-missiles specifically. Because for some reason, some of our people saw in this statement that he was promising K-missiles. No, he's promising systems. But that's not all. The publication writes that Trump will announce a new plan to arm Ukraine on Monday, which is expected to include offensive weapons. And it's not a simple one. Next, I'll give a quote. Two sources reported that they have reason to believe the plan will include long-range missiles capable of reaching targets deep inside Russia, including Moscow. At the same time, Senator Lindsey Graham told Axios that Trump is indeed angry at Putin, and his upcoming statement will be very aggressive. Axios notes that the new initiative, which will be presented at the meeting between Trump and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, assumes that European countries will pay for American-made weapons that will be sent to Ukraine. By the way, this arrangement was proposed by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky during the NATO summit 2 weeks ago. It is also noted that one of the factors that convinced Trump to take this path was a phone conversation with Vladimir Putin on July 3rd, in which the Russian dictator made it clear that he plans to escalate the war. Putin made it clear to Trump that over the next 60 days he plans to intensify the offensive with the goal of fully capturing all 4 occupied regions of Ukraine. And here is a specialized publication. Citing sources, claims that Trump is considering supplying Ukraine with long-range joint air-to-surface standoff missile cruise missiles. These missiles are intended for the American F-16 fighter jets currently in service with the Ukrainian armed forces and are capable of striking targets deep behind the front lines on Russian territory. So, in its the very basic modification, the Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missile has a range of 370 kilometers. In the Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missile Extended Range version, that's the extended range version. 926 kilometers, almost 1,000. The strike zone of the first basic missiles includes the Voronezh, Bryansk and Kaliningrad regions, plus military targets in occupied Crimea and Novorossiysk, including almost all of the Navy bases in the Black Sea. In the second case, the missiles have a longer range. Most of central Russia, the Caucasus, the Volga region, and even the Leningrad region will be under threat. And the key point is that these missiles will easily reach Moscow. It is reported that currently Poland has such missiles and the United States rarely sells them to other countries. Only 4 countries in the world use them, the United States, Poland, and 2 others. But from Poland, according to the already established scheme of transferring weapons, these missiles can easily end up in Ukraine and actually reach Moscow. American media are already even joking that Trump has decided to carry out his long-standing threat to bomb Moscow. At the same time, on the eve of Trump's statement, Senator Lindsey Graham announced that in the coming days the United States will provide Ukraine with a record supply of weapons. He said that the United States will start selling a huge amount of weapons to its European allies. And so on. He added that after several months of Trump's attempts to persuade the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin to negotiate, a turning point is approaching in the issue of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Graham noted that Trump kept the door open regarding Russia, and that door is about to close, hinting at a bill that provides for tough sanctions against the Russian Federation. And now I'll quote Graham, "Trump has a sledgehammer to strike at Putin's economy and all the countries that support his war machine. China, India, and Brazil buy oil, petroleum products, and other goods from Russia. Putin uses this money for the war, and this bill is truly a sledgehammer available to Trump to put an end to this war." Nevertheless, unfortunately, we should not rule out the bargaining that continues between the United States and Europe regarding arms supplies to Ukraine. Germany does not plan to transfer its Taurus air-launched cruise missiles or the American Patriot air defense systems, which are in service with its army, to Ukraine. This was announced today by the German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius. But as we remember, Germany once absolutely did not plan to transfer Leopard tanks to Ukraine either. However, after negotiations with the Americans, they did. And here's an important point. That very missile is an air-launched missile that is mounted on the F-16. The Taurus missile is also air-launched. And do you remember how it was with the Leopards? First, the Americans delivered Abrams tanks, and then the Germans said, okay, after that, we're ready to deliver our Leopards. If Trump really decides to deliver these missiles, as you know, Germany must take the next step. And soon Pistorius has a meeting scheduled with the United States Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, and in Washington they will discuss the roadmap for American support of Europe and the urgent need to strengthen Ukraine's air defense. The German minister stated that his country cannot provide more Patriot systems to the Ukrainian armed forces, since it only has 6 such complexes out of the 12 it had before the war. Germany has already supplied 3 to Ukraine, lent 2 to Poland, and 1 more is undergoing maintenance. At the same time, Pistorius plans to discuss with Hegseth a proposal under which Germany could simply buy 2 Patriot systems from the United States for Ukraine. And it seems that the United States is not opposed to such an arrangement. In general, as you can see, there has been increased movement toward boosting arms supplies to Ukraine. All of this is due to the utterly foolish stance of the dictator Putin himself. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care, everyone. Bye.